afternoon, everybody. I'm Susanna Calvert, founder and convener for Mission and Vision for the Foundation for Family and Community Healing. Welcome to our engaging spirituality discussion series. I'm so glad to be offering this series among our one of our many offerings for the community, where we are exploring our relationship with ourselves, each other, Earth, and the loving force that unites us. We have 4 meditations a month, a speaker and a video series, as well as a couple discussion series, including this one. So grateful to our convener, Tim Ford, for organizing this wonderful and pretty new discussion series, and our guest, Dr. J. Kyle Howard. And we are going to have about an hour to discuss with Jay his views on spirituality in an informal group. It'll be just us panelists. And then in the last 15 minutes or so, we'll open it up for anybody on the call who would like to join in with a question. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Tim to tell us about the series, and then I will come back and introduce Jay.
Thanks, Susanna. And I'm really excited to be doing this. This is our third in this series. And this series came out because Susanna and I were having such interesting discussions about our own views and the things that informed us. But more importantly, when we started talking about our spirituality in particular, we talked about how it applies and how to put it into practice. And we found that we had such an interesting diversity just between the two of us, but also as we started to discuss our greater community and the people that inspired us, we realized that we had kind of an embarrassment of riches in terms of wise and very, very interesting and diverse spiritual leaders and thought leaders and wisdom elders and others that could guide us. And so we decided to launch this series to not only have sort of a celebration of that diversity of the people that we know that have inspired us and have sort of brought our larger circles together, but also in a kind of more applied sense, trying to come up with a practical understanding of how we can take all these diverse spiritual beliefs and understandings and how people apply them and put them into practice and bring them into manifestation in the world, and then have a discussion about how those things go together. So the origins of this series was a desire to not only explore and celebrate our diverse spiritual heritages, but also a really practical sense on what to do with that and how that engages.
Yes, and we're so delighted to be expanding this conversation to include you all. So our guest this month is J. Kyle Howard. He's a very dear friend of mine and crazy talented guy who's a seasoned author. He's published, I don't know how many books, more than I can count on my fingers. He's worked in the technology industry as an executive for many, many years, and is the founder of the BTI Group, the Business Technology Integration Group. He also holds an MBA in business and a PhD in metaphysics. So, well, we'll dispense with the doctor title for now, Jay.
Appreciate it.
But thank you so much for joining us today. I always enjoy our discussions about spirituality. It's always eye-opening for me, but it doesn't also take much to open my eyes to something new. And I think that's my role in this series, is to ask the obvious questions. So Tim, you want to lead us off with the discussion?
Sure, I'd be glad to start. Jay and I, we've only had a chance to chat a little bit when we first met, and I'm really eager to start this conversation with you and talk to you. So Susanna and I were talking before we started about the season of Easter and this season that we're in. So I'll start off with sort of an Easter question, if you will, of the hope that you see coming forward. If you go up to the mountaintop right now and look forward, what are you seeing that you want to bring back and let us know about? Is there something in particular that you're hoping?
Absolutely, yes. Well, first, let me apologize for my fashion sense. I didn't realize I'd be sitting in front of a striped shape with a striped shirt, so it made me a little. So I didn't realize that at the time. I thought I was gonna have a solid background, but that wasn't the case. And so now I feel like I'm in
Jay,
some
I'm
sort
wearing
of.
plaid on a Zoom call. I think you're fine.
There we go. Working from home. From the mountaintop, it would be about gaining a better perspective on what we call this pandemic. Generally speaking, I tend to look at any occurrence in the universe from either an esoteric or mundane standpoint. And what I'm looking at is this has been an opportunity for us to get closer to ourselves. I've seen how the work-life balance has shifted a little bit, where people are working from home more. They're starting to experience their families. It's also causing some disruptions within the family unit, but this pandemic has made us aware even more socially as to what's important if we focus on that, because it has literally taken away all the distractions. There was no sports. We couldn't go out and have, social events. And for most of us who paid attention, it was a great opportunity to kind of turn inside and just to see how we are affecting the world, particularly when it's a life or death situation. And there's been this idea that we're going to go back to normal, but normal wasn't that great prior to that, right? Normal sucked, and so we have all this social disturbance and all these things. And I see it's just preparing us to be better. I'm looking at the different movements. There's social movements in terms of race, sex, gender, and all of these things have been aware where they were underground before. And so we're starting to figure out finally, how do we love one another? How do we get along with one another? And I see at the end of it all, this big focus on the golden rule. And that's always been my philosophy. It doesn't matter whether we like each other, but I'm going to treat you the way I want you to treat me. And so, if we get to that point, then I think the world will be fine.
I hear in your answer there's two things there, and I wonder how you put them together.
Mm-hmm.
So one I heard was you never know what you got till it's gone.
Yep.
Right. So that sense of social community that we had, that we
Yes.
were maybe taking for granted,
Yes.
because we weren't in the absence of it, and now we're all
Yes.
so crazy hungry
Yes.
for getting together and gathering.
Yes.
But I also heard, and I think I hear you saying, part of that sort of truth that comes out, you can't hide from it when you get close in like that. You can't pretend, you can't distract yourself from hard conversations and truth
Yes.
about each other and how we have to get along,
Yes.
where we could before distract ourselves and go entertain ourselves and go somewhere else. Now
Yes.
we're kind of caught in this. We have to deal with the family that we've got. We
Yes.
have to deal with the relationships we're in. So, and I hear that in your sort of hope for that means now we can come back around to
Yes.
a more authentic.
Yes. Like even our basic educational platforms have been impacted.
Yeah, boy.
There are parents now who had no idea what teachers had to deal with when they send their little ones off to school. And now you have to be parent, teacher, instructor. And so I've always wondered why teachers weren't elevated to a higher level than what they are in society. Like it always troubled me that, athletics and all these other things were paid a lot more than teaching. And then when we look at the platform of education as we've been doing it for centuries, something has to change. And so we're at that point now. How do we figure out how to do this global change management process and stop pointing fingers at all these other people saying, well, this person was responsible for this, this person was responsible for that. And so to folks who've been impacted one way or another, where they may have lost someone in this pandemic, my heart goes out to them. But even that, it just makes you aware of how precious life is, and that at any moment, we can be snatched off of this rolling ball in space.
I know clinically when I talk to people who are suddenly facing a death or having just lost someone, everything gets really poignant and everything gets
Yes.
really profound. And there is an opportunity then to do some pretty radical change. It's one of the things
Yes.
I've always joked about. I'd rather work with people in crisis than people in regular,
Yes.
because there's this opportunity that you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
But I'm also struggling, and I'm thinking about this as we transition back out of the pandemic.
Right.
Um, how do we take this conflagration, this, really, really powerful moment, and turn it into something that isn't just going to be a flash, that isn't just
Right.
going to be, okay, now we're done, let's go back. Like you said,
Right.
we can't just go back to normal.
Right.
So what's our role in sort of, I don't know, baking this into the pie?
I've never really seen, well, there's two things. One, as a person who works in the tech field, I see the negative impact of technology, where it has been a source of separating us. But
Hmm.
in the other vein, because we couldn't get together physically, this provides, that. So if you take something as simple as dating, remember you have to actually go out and meet people. And now you just pick up your phone, you look at their profile, you swipe right. Like, you don't get to know anybody. It's all a physical appearance on a digital product. And you're swiping right or left just based on, what you think. And I say that because I've benefited from it too. So, but, the other thing is, we've never had, as a social construct, a a goal. Like, we've never had a goal where we were trying to get someplace as a collective body of humans. It's like,
Oh yeah.
and when in any work environment, all projects have a goal, and everybody's galvanized around achieving that goal. So sports and business modeling has, if we look at it and kind of dissect that, you're getting a group of people from diverse backgrounds, all focused on a similar goal.
Hmm.
But we never extend that out socially as a collective,
Hmm.
right? And I've played professional sports, and we had all races, backgrounds, beliefs, but the goal was, in that instance, was to win. And so everybody galvanized around winning as a team. And, we put all the other noise to the side. And we do the same thing with business in terms of projects. We have a goal of accomplishing something, and you get all these different bodies together and we move them in a similar direction without having to give up your individuality. We're not even asking for that. We're just asking you to contribute
Hmm.
in the success of the goal. And I believe that from a universal standpoint, there's been plenty of times that we were inspired to do it, but we didn't. And so, that innovation comes from inspiration or desperation. Well, now we're desperate,
Hmm.
because we've seen a loss of life and it's right in our faces. We've seen, and it's ironic to me how we kind of paint pictures on different social groups when we see different actions. And now I see that stuff is extended across the board. And there's a lot of things, like, I realized I had some biases about some things.
Hmm.
And, just watching how the world operates and go, oh, I never would have thought that until now. But we've just never really had a global goal in any instance where we're trying to accomplish something. And I think that we're at the peril now where, if we don't take heed, the world will shake us off. This earth will shake us off and start over. I think it's
Hmm.
done it, many times before. And this pandemic, to me, is sort of a cue. And they can blame it on, China, whatever. But, this thing has impacted everyone. And at some point, we have to figure out, well, what are the things that we're trying to accomplish as a human race? And how do we all kind of get together without giving up ourselves, to kind of move that ball forward? Now, we also beset with greed.
Yeah, I was
So,
just thinking, I was just going there. When you start talking about a shared goal, right?
yeah,
Historically,
there's
we
that
keep
greed thing.
coming
There's
up
that
with,
greed
well, my
component.
goal is to be rich. My
Yeah,
goal is to take what you've got and
yeah,
make it mine.
yeah. And and that's the funny thing. Like, I always reflect back to the whole Cain and Abel story,
Uh-huh.
right? Where there was only two, so it's always seemed like as long as there's two, there's going to be conflict. So, and they were brothers, and come from the same bloodline. So there was not physical, racial, religious difference. It
Hmm.
was just two with opposing thoughts. And so it is a hurdle to get over. But I think, and we could start small. I mean, I've always believed you start as an individual, you extend it out to your family. From there, you go to your community. From the community, you go to your state, to your country, and then you just keep expanding it out. But it all starts here. We have to have the desire to kind of do that and then just figure out a plan to get it. I think, we're all willing. We're all driving towards the same stuff. We just haven't gotten together to figure out exactly how do we galvanize
But I
everyone
think, Jay,
around.
there's a value in articulating that same stuff. Like we can
Yes,
all march to the flag and charge that hill, but like you're using with sports and tech
yes,
metaphors, if we don't know what we're charging for, as soon as it gets rough, we're going to split.
absolutely.
Well,
So what do you think the role of spirituality plays in all of this transformation, Jay? Because I think you're saying you feel there's a transformation coming because
Yes,
of the pandemic,
mhm,
more towards the golden rule, more
yes,
towards us loving each other, and that a shared goal would help. So
yes.
how does
mhm,
spirituality, as we are seeing it evolve, play into all of that
mhm,
dynamic?
Well, see, for me, I think spirituality is that one connecting factor. The problem is we get so hung up on dogma,
mhm,
and it's the dogma that separates us all. And
mhm.
so you have one person who believes in this thing and another person who believes in that thing, or when I'm talking religious dogma, that has it has some tenets of spirituality, but I think we get caught up in the dogma of it, where you hear people complaining about, well, we don't say Christmas anymore, or we don't, the stuff that doesn't really matter, right?
Mhm.
We all come here with that built into our systems, and then we're taught by other entities about how special our particular religion is as opposed to others, when it's all the same. And so if we start speaking in sameness and then it being acceptable of other people's dogmatic beliefs, and dogma sounds like a horrible word, but it's really, to me, it's kind of like noise. Like when I think about Easter, you have some people who look at it from a Christian standpoint. You have some people who look at it from, the Easter Bunny standpoint. And no one ever asked the question, what does the two of those have to do with one another?
My daughter asked that on the drive down this
Right.
weekend. Mhm.
And we all know that rabbits don't lay eggs, but we see this on television, and and so the media plays a lot into this, where they start driving these narratives. And if you repeatedly see something over and over and over again, you'll start to believe it or respond to it in a certain way. But the spirituality piece of it, that's something that connects us all. It's almost like air. That is the thing. I think of it like fish. Like, you have all these fish swimming in water, and then you take a fish and he jumps up and he sees land, and he comes back and goes, we're in water. And other fish are like, what is water?
Mhm.
Because we're in it. That is the stuff that we're in. And, we tend to take it for granted. We sort of kill off the things that help us to live and breathe because we don't see the importance of it. But to me, the spirituality piece is that piece that ties us together, even with atheists, right? Atheists, in my opinion, are pro, um, well, I should say they're anti-dogma. Like, I don't necessarily understand what they're not believing in. Like, you almost have to believe in a thing to say it doesn't exist,
Mhm.
right? Because you've created a picture of it and say, well, this thing doesn't exist. So you've already created it to say that it doesn't exist. But there's something inside of all of us that lets us know that there's something, I won't say bigger than us, it's in us. And we have the ability to act within it to create. And I just don't think we understand fully what our true powers are, how we can manifest the world that we live in. And we tend to focus on other things outside of ourselves, or pointing a finger and trying to decide that there's some person in the sky who has male attributes. And
Don't forget the beard, Jay.
oh
Don't
yeah,
forget
the
the beard. Beard.
beard.
Mhm.
Before he would throw lightning bolts, but now it's well, let's paint this picture. And I always find it interesting that we try to logically explain something illogical or give emotions to something that's unemotional. So when we're trying to determine spirituality or the God concept based on our limited view, our senses, we can't define the undefinable. And we have to accept that that's just something that we won't know, but we know exists, almost like oxygen. Like no one, I always find it interesting when we try to explain what something is when we can only explain what we've observed. Like we know that if you plant a seed, it can grow into a tree and produce fruit, but we don't know how that happens.
And you said it there, Jay. I absolutely get your idea of, we get distracted by the dogma piece, and
Yes.
we start to mistake the dogma for the content.
Yes.
And what I just heard you say is that there's a trust in our own power, our own spiritual
Yes.
power, that we can't unlock until we start to actually taste that, until we actually
Yes.
feel it. And
Yes.
a lot of the dogma to me isn't necessarily negative or distracting.
Right.
It is divisive, yes,
Yes.
but it can invite you, if you find the right one that fits you.
Yes.
You find one that unlocks that power for you, and you're like, oh,
Yes.
that's what that's for. A
Yes.
sudden, and then you can say, I don't need that anymore now
Right.
that I've unlocked what it was trying to show me.
Yes. I think it is necessary. I think that
I think so too.
we're all at different spiritual positions at this time and space. I'm a firm believer in reincarnation. That's my belief, because I don't
Okay.
believe that energy dies.
Yeah.
So we come back time and time again, and there are new spirits here as well as older ones. And so dogma plays a role, almost like kindergarten plays with young kids.
Yeah.
It creates some boundaries around a belief system. And as you migrate through, like you would do in any normal school setting, as you gain more knowledge, the dogma plays less of an important role for you. Well, it should, because we do see adults who still
One of my heart teachers is a Tibetan Rinpoche, right? So deep into that tradition.
Yes.
And he explained his particular form of Kagyu Tibetan Buddhism. He described it as kindergarten Buddhism because it has so many things to play with.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
he said, all of this stuff, the gods and the chanting and all the extra stuff are
Yes.
blocks that you learn the alphabet with.
Yes.
And once you learn the alphabet, you don't need the blocks.
You do not.
And
for me,
his point was that the college level Buddhism, as he put it, was when you get your butt on the cushion and actually listen.
Yes.
Is when you stop.
My defining factor for me, when I realized that I had moved, I started off praying for things for me. And then I graduated to praying for things for everyone else. And so that was a defining factor for me, because I knew that I could not be I could not benefit solely from whatever the universe has to offer unless everyone else benefited. And so that was the point for me. And then deciding that I was going to live by the golden rule. So whatever I wanted for me, I want for you.
Yeah.
And I would hope, you do the same.
So this is my question to both Tim and Jay, because I think I'm hearing that maybe there needs to be a certain level of consciousness before there can be this evolution and this growth and this moving forward collectively towards this shared, so far unstated collective goal of golden rule and loving each other. Is that the case? And if so, I see you both nodding. So how do we reach that critical mass, both in number and level?
Well, I think the largest hurdle is beliefs always outweigh fact until you can change the belief. And that's a tough challenge. People looks at fact, but if they believe something different, then that's what's true for them. And the universe will always provide you what you believe in. And so for those folks who hold on to these archaic beliefs, it's going to take a much more impact, a consistent conversation about it, something that, when you're comparing what you believe to fact, and the hardest person to ever lie to is yourself. And so even though you try to believe in that misinformation, deep down inside, it's not true. But when you continually hear it and you continually see it, and when we start looking at things like flowers blooming as a miracle and not just something that just happens, it's almost like redefining what miracles are. And so people can change. I've changed, and a lot of people can. They just have to be willing to just decide that they don't know. I really don't know, and I'm willing to learn and just open themselves up to that. And
I
then
was thinking that
question.
as you talked a little bit about the development of prayer there, from moving
Yes,
from a prayer of, please, Lord, let me have a better parking place, to,
yes,
please, Lord, let me be helpful to other people, to
yes,
please help them. And I think
yes,
the next one up for me, and this is something I've learned from a lot of patients over the years, the next one up is thy will be done, of
yes,
letting go of my expectation of what it should be. Like,
absolutely.
and I think you just said it in terms of not just questioning my facts really, or my
Mhm.
beliefs, but surrendering them
Yes,
like completely, and saying
yes,
I might not even know what is the best thing here,
yep,
and so I'm going to open myself to receiving and listening rather than
yes,
putting out there. And I think that's a hard, that's a, to me, Susanna, that's the sort of developmental step of when
yes,
you start to reach um, the ability to talk to people from different places and bring people together. Because
yes.
if, as long as I'm coming in with, I'll tell it as a story because this is the way I love it. A teacher of mine once said it as, he told this story about a guy who was so good at meditating that everybody in the small village where he lived wanted to come meditate with him. And so he started to invite everybody in, and okay, you can come pray with me, you can come meditate with me. But before we start, I'm going to put on some tea, and I'm going to put the cat in the kitchen so he doesn't mess with us while we're sitting. And this goes on for decades, and everybody does it the same way every single weekend when they come to his house. And after he dies, they decide to build a temple in his honor, his practice. And as soon as they open the temple, the first thing they say is, "Oh my gosh, we have to go out and get a cat, because you
Yep.
can't do this without
Can't
putting a
do it without
cat
the
in
cat.
the
Yep.
kitchen." And his
There
point
goes
of
the.
a dogma was that, it's all cats in the kitchen.
Yes.
And we have to be able to discern which ones are cats
Yes.
and which ones are practice. And
Yes.
I do think one of the places where you reach critical mass is when you start to say, all right, maybe we don't need a cat.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
I'm very humble about this, because I'm very
Right.
attached to all
Yeah.
my cats and all the different ways I like to do things, because I'm particular. And it took me a long time to find the ones that really fit me well.
Yes.
And I struggle when it's time to let those go and move to the next ones. I'm always going to do it kicking and screaming, and usually trying to hold on to my toys.
Yes.
Well,
You
and,
know.
and
Go
I
ahead.
can add in the developmental theory perspective. So,
Please.
I have a certification in adult development theory, assessment, and coaching. Um, and One of the things that the theory says is that one of the ways we expand our ability to understand and manage complexity is through challenge. And
Mm-hmm.
so, first of all, like whenever somebody comes into my office and they're like in a crisis and they've hit rock bottom, I'm just like, yay!
Yeah. Woo!
That's right.
Our
You're
beliefs,
You're ready. You're ready.
devastated. That's fantastic.
all
Yeah.
those beliefs that Jay tells us, mention locks us into place, go away. And
Mm-hmm.
then like there's this openness that becomes possible. And so
Yes.
secondly, as crappy as it's been for the past year and a half, like this is our collective rock bottom, or
Yeah.
Yep.
or we're
Yep.
circling that. and and so uh, this theory is silent on collective develop, development, but I think that collectively we probably go through similar stages and opportunities. And the
I would agree
worse
with
our
that.
challenges are
Hmm.
as a group, the more we must confront the beliefs that got us there in the first place. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's okay to just tear down forests and dig up land and, endlessly. And yeah, it's okay to just, do what's in our own best interest, regardless of the community health or public health. I mean, these beliefs that, and the money, the capital, all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Um, we have to re-examine them. And so, and that we are also facing this when we are encountering an existential crisis of climate change is like the perfect storm. And the worse it
Mm-hmm.
gets for us environmentally, the more it's going to drive our learning and growth, and
Hmm.
hopefully our openness and our ability to ask different questions
Yes.
and to elevate
Yeah.
to this
Yeah.
critical mass. So
And I believe that there are more folks out here like us than not. It's just that the loudest naysayers get the media presence. And so it seems like there's much more of those voices out there when they're in the minority for sure. It's like I said, it's, and I don't even believe that they believe what they're saying. I think it's motivated by money. Some organization is paying you to say there's no such thing as climate change,
Right.
you know, when they see it. You know,
Well,
they,
and the momentum of the historical things that we've all agreed to participate in that might not be so wonderful.
yes,
Part of that is the momentum of media too,
yes,
of consuming the titillating and consuming the negative,
yes,
and not looking for things that try to speak to our power because that's uncomfortable. Um,
exactly.
and media is designed to not be uncomfortable.
And that's been the biggest challenge, I think. Like for those who are part of my research, I had to really study the Bible from cover to cover.
Hmm.
And when I was relying on some pastor to tell me what was in there, they skipped over a lot of stuff that I
They sure
find
do,
very
yeah.
important. You
Well,
know,
because you don't get people in the pews with those
right?
messages, right?
Like one of the stories was, we don't really need someone telling us what God put on our hearts
Hmm.
because it's there. Like, and so of course they won't tell you that part. But one
Right.
of the things that I saw was being created in His image, and I go, so to me, then the ultimate sin then is not living your godly presence
Yeah.
because it's here. And
Oh,
so, but
that's
there's
challenging.
everything in this world has been designed to pull us out of that, because you can control a person who don't know who they are.
Jay, I'm trying to put this together because I think there's a theme here that Susanna put up again that you
Mhm.
started with, which is pandemic as metaphor of
Yes.
Mother Earth shaking at us, trying
Yes.
to wake us up a little bit.
Yep.
I just heard you say it too, because I've heard preachers do it well
Yes.
when they do that piece. But I was very challenged by how you just said that, which is the greatest sin we have is to not manifest the power of God that we have within us.
Yes.
Um, and I'm putting that together with Mother Earth
Yes.
shaking at us to wake us up with this pandemic of you are not manifesting the power
Yes.
of the collective that I know
Right.
you can do. And that's what I'm coming back with Susanna brought us to
Because
is
those things
that
that we call challenges, they're all shaking us. Like these things we call
uh,
atrocities and things, all they're doing is saying, hey, do you know who you
opportunity.
are? Because
Hmm.
no one change in comfort and ease. Like I would never accumulate anything if I'm stretched out on a beach all day, right?
Uh,
But if you put me naked in a snowstorm, now I got to figure out, I got a challenge now because I need to get warm. And so I'm motivated to do something. And I think, you know, all these things from slavery to what we're dealing with today has all been a collective shaking us to wake up to who we are supposed to be. And it's said, I mean, from cover to cover, that's all the book is. It is the difference. It is that struggle between your God spirit and your five senses or ego. That's all it's about. And so you're either going to listen to one as a master or the other. It even says that you can't serve two masters. And so you're either going to be who you were designed to be, or you're going to frolic in this world
yeah.
as some lowly being who's relying on their five senses to get through life.
I've got this juxtaposition in my mind as you say it of this image of Mother Earth that's probably I'm going to own as my own, but scold as
Mhm.
a you haven't done it right and you're not listening.
Yep.
And I think that's not a good, very good image. The image that you're using of God there, that I think is a much better one, is the gentle hand trying to wake you up from a nightmare.
Yes.
Of I'm here and I want to help you. But the image
Yes.
that really just hit me just now was this is a patient that I had who was with his grandfather as he was dying, and his grandfather was a devout Catholic. And the young man that I was talking to was sharing stories about his grandfather's life.
Mhm.
And he said, when granddad was first diagnosed and was dying, he handed me his rosary. And he said, I want you to have this. And he said, I know you've been messing around with all these harder drugs. And I know that you have been playing at stuff
Wow.
that you shouldn't be playing with. And now is the time for you to stop doing that.
Mhm.
And I want you to hold this legacy of mine, and handed him his rosary.
Yes.
And you know this from, I know Susanna probably
Yeah.
knows this from addiction stuff. There's a moment that can work, the rock bottom
Yeah.
that Susanna mentioned. It just happened to be the key in the lock for that young man at that moment
Right.
of, okay, I'm done with playing around. I'm done with this hedonistic game that I've been playing
Yeah.
of just trying to get mine and trying to get by. And it's like his grandfather opened for him by using his deathbed
Yes.
as a powerful moment of crisis. But to say, here's the legacy, here's my rosary,
Yes.
here's the path, and now is the time. And I'm
That's
thinking about this from our whole conversation, right? Of taking this moment of acute pandemic crisis and
yes.
turning it into longevity of a longitudinal
Right.
change that's not just individual, but really invites us to collective
Yes.
change and invites us
Yes.
to think about this as a group.
Yeah. And we either focus on the growth or the pain. And,
Yeah.
we can't, there's nothing we can do about the people who have been negatively impacted. I don't like negative or positive. There have been people who've been impacted.
Yeah.
And we could look at it and focus on the pain of that, or we can look at it as a position of growth. How
Yeah.
do we grow as a community of humans from this situation? But then then you throw in the politics and all this other stuff. We keep
Mhm.
regenerating the same
But
people over and over again. But we don't need that because it's here, right? We have to focus on ourselves. And that's why I say, being selfish is a good thing. Self-centered isn't, but
Mhm.
when you start looking internal at yourself and stop even this focus on some being outside of ourselves, right? It's here. I always say, there was never an eighth day. On the seventh day, God was like, okay, I'm done. I've given you all I need to give you. I'm out. There was never an eighth day. He never came back another day to do anything else. So it was all put into us to do what we need to do here, to make the changes, to focus on love and growth and connection, as opposed to not. And so, that's always drives me, like, what could I possibly do to make a situation better in my small talent that I have? And so my struggle was trying to earn money and spirituality, and I couldn't figure out how to do both. And so,
Mhm.
of course,
I
it
feel you.
seems like, but they do tie together
They do.
because who I present myself, even in the confines of corporation, I can inspire people to look internally while still meeting the bottom line.